Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our YouTube channel, Wagner on Ethics and Leadership. Today, we are talking about part 3 of the book Beyond Love Trauma. Dr. Wagner is a professor of STEM education with the College of Education at University of Houston Clear Lake, also a full-time professor of philosophy and logic with the College of Human Sciences and Humanities at the University of Houston Clear Lake. And that's also where he taught the philosophy of sex class, a graduate level course, which was cross-listed in psychology and in philosophy. He is also honored by the Who's Who in America, Who's Who in the World, Who's Who in American Education, and as an outstanding young man in America. After completing 11 books, publishing 11 books and over 200 articles and more in the works, today we're talking about uh, the last topics of Beyond Love Trauma. Dr. Wagner, what is the purpose of marriage in the audience your book addresses?
Well, the book is addressing people who have already had one either failed marriage or a marriage that ended. Perhaps a person had died, but they've already experienced marriage to some extent. They're in their at least their late 20s or above, and so they're a more mature audience than those who meet up in college or graduate school and get connected. And the one of the things we want to talk about is that uh, marriage is constructing a social entity that has never before existed in history. And you say, well, how is that? Well, as soon as you get married, all of a sudden, both of you become responsible for one another's expenditures on credit cards, and you're both responsible for upkeep of the house, or if anything were to happen to the couple, things had to be, split in some way between the two, regardless of who paid what at the beginning. When people invite you to dinner or to a party, they can't say, well, Mr. So-and-so, will you come, but please don't bring your wife. Or they're not going to say to Mrs. So-and-so, will you come, but please don't bring your husband. You're an entity now together. And that never existed before. Before, you were two individuals going through life, and the world responded to you in that way. Now, the world still responds to you as individuals, but the world also sees that you're part of a social entity that never before existed. You are the Mr. and Mrs.
Okay. So earlier in one of the videos, I believe the book Love Trauma, the first one, you mentioned about 1 plus 1 being not equal to 11. 1 plus 1 equals to 11, not to something in sort
Right,
of that.
right.
So
And it had
some
been popular in pop psychology for a while. It was hip for people on TV or whatever to say is, well, one doesn't one make two when you're talking about marriage. Rather, it's like a one and a one standing next to each other. It's an 11. Each is wholly independent and they're standing next to each other. Yeah, that's nonsense. It sounds like a school kid's metaphor. The fact of the matter is, when you get married, you lose part of that isolation that you have. A closer metaphor to the one and one idea would be two ships passing in the night. Two ships passing in the night don't engage one another. They can wave at one another. The other ship goes on its way and it may hit an iceberg and go down, like the Titanic, and the other one sailed on. Two independent ships that just happened to pass by each other. That's not a marriage. So a marriage isn't one and one standing next to each other. It is creating that new unit. And if you want to call that new unit a two, I don't care what name you want to give to it, but it is a name for the new social entity that the couple has been able to create, and they are responsible for sustaining it.
okay, so I see the reason why you disagree with 1 and 1 plus 1.
That's right.
Um, so from the book, if you want to make your partner happier or love them more, what can you do?
Well, that's really simple. It almost sounds like the my recommendation is going to sound like something we say to children in the fourth grade when they're about to learn something new. It's real simple. 3 words: watch, listen, learn. Watch the person that you're with, and they, by their body language and everything that they do, they're sending a message to you. It may not even be conscious, but they're sending a message to you. Again, to go to some of the pop literature, some of the pop literature talks about people having languages of love. And that's not a bad idea. It just sounds too hip, but it's not a bad idea. Somebody who makes sure that they get up earlier than the spouse and they fix breakfast for them every morning, that can be a way that they're showing love toward the other. And if you're watching what your spouse does and you notice that they do that for you every day, you shouldn't take that for granted. You should celebrate there's somebody in love with you, and that this is one of the ways that they're showing that love. Whenever somebody leaves the house or comes back in the house, if the first thing they do is, say hello and they kiss their spouse, take notice of that, because whether or not they say the words "I love you," they're showing you that they love you. So, watch. The next one is listen. Does the person speak to you with respect? That doesn't mean that, no one can ever get angry at another. That'd be abnormal. But you can even be angry at somebody and still speak to them with respect. So, do you feel that your spouse is always addressing you with respect, whether they're happy or angry or sad, but they're always addressing you with respect? And similarly, do you do the same? Do you know that's your responsibility to always speak to them with respect? And so we listen. We listen very carefully to what the other person is telling us. And then finally, learn. You can listen but not hear. So you've really got to learn from what you're listening. If you're watching, but you're not storing anything away, you're wasting your time that you're watching. You've got to learn from what you're watching. Do you see that this person is expressing love to you by what they do with their actions, without even being asked? One of the worst things that couples can do, and they sometimes, again, because it's hip, they negotiate with each other. You only negotiate in a business. If you have to negotiate in your marriage, the marriage is already weakened and is on the verge of falling apart. If the people love each other and they watch, listen, and learn, there's no need for negotiation because each party is listening. Each party wants to learn, and each party wants to do what they can to show respect for the other. Watch, listen, and learn, and your marriage will be sustainable.
But that advice, um, for today's generation, who has attention span of of a little bird, how would that work? Because today's generation does not have the time to watch, listen, or learn.
You always have a time to watch. Anytime you see the other person, watch them. Anytime the other person is talking to you, don't just hear them, listen to what they're saying. Really hear them. No matter how often they talk to you that day or how little they talk to you, listen, hear what they have to say, and learn, file it away. Think about what the other person has to say. Think about what the other person has to say. That's how we learn. Watch,
Simple
listen,
as
and
that.
learn.
Simple as that. um, do you have any ideas on how we can better share emotional intimacies with our partner? Because emotional affairs seems to be the number one, based on the conversation we had earlier, number one type of extramarital affair.
I do. Let me show you a couple of things here. This, first of all, this is the book on it. Yeah, you
Yes,
can see it
beyond
here.
of trauma. Yes,
That's
sir.
the book. A little diagram here to kind of keep things in mind that I kind of marked off for us. And are you able to see this? The
A little
diagram?
closer. Yes, yes, perfect.
Okay. So that gives you an idea of what you're aiming for, and emotional intimacy is what's taking you forward. But now I'm going to take you to something that's in the back of the book. In the back of the book are uh, some questionnaires to help you build up intellectual and emotional intimacies. And let me tell you a couple about these things before we really get rolling on something a bit later. Um, okay. Um, well, here is one that's called the secret exchange. Your spouse should be like a treasure chest of the jewels of your life, and those are bits and pieces of your memory. And the most precious ones are those in which you felt most celebratory and the ones in which you felt most hurt. But you need someone who can celebrate with you and feel your pain for the ones that, were difficult. It's got to be somebody you trust and somebody that you take these jewels when they're shared with you, you put them away because they were meant just for you and no one else. And so as each of you fill one another's treasure box of secrets, you're building up your emotional intimacy. So I have a game here. I have in the appendices, there's 3 different games for doing this sort of thing. This one's called the secret exchange. And so let me read you the rules and I'll give you a couple of questions. One is everyone has a right to privacy. No one gives up that right because they marry. No one should be coerced into answering any one of the following questions. So that's rule one. Rule two, before either of you begins answering a given question, both of you must review the question and agree to answer it with complete candor before either of you starts responding. Rule three, attempt to be as detailed as possible in your answer. Let the other person know every little detail, the highest moments, no matter how small, and the lowest moments, no matter how big. This is no time for being cagey or hedging your bets. It's time for being outwardly honest in every way. And then finally, number four, do not attempt to answer any more than 3 of the following questions in any one sitting. Because when you try to answer too many of these, because they're meant to go deep, you start trivializing your answers. To attempt too much can also be exhausting. When people become exhausted, they become easily agitated. Overkill can also lead the respondents to become glib with their responses. Since your goal here is to develop emotional intimacy, there is nothing to be gained by taking shortcuts or risk misunderstanding through either deceit or omission. So as just a couple of samples, and there's 25, there's 45 of these questions for you in the secret exchange. So this should keep you going for at least a year of marriage. And then afterwards, you may not have to do this anymore. But I'll just give you a couple. I'm picking at random. As a child, when were you most frightened? Don't try to answer it. It's just think about the question. When you were most frightened, you would not tell this to most people. We're looking for the sorts of things that you would not tell most people. Yeah, here's another one. When were you most humiliated by an adult member of the other sex? Another one. What is truly the kindest thing anyone ever did for you?
So this is more like the game of truth and dare, except
Well,
one
yeah,
rule.
but it's
You
it's
can't
yeah,
dare.
it's not like that. These questions are far more
Yeah,
penetrating than that, because
yeah.
in truth and dare, you're just playing around, and you're doing it for enjoyment. These questions are meant to make you feel uncomfortable because you're not going to tell an answer to these honestly, except to somebody that you really treasure. And so that's got to be somebody that you really trust, somebody that wants to remember your answer to every one of these and keeps them in their treasure box of learning who you were. I'll give you two more. What was the luckiest thing that ever happened to you? How about this one? When do you feel your experience has had the greatest depth? What experience have you ever had that had the greatest depth? These aren't easy to answer. None of them are about sexual innuendo, but each of them are, if you will, about your heart and soul. When were you most humiliated by somebody? I don't want to tell anybody that. My gosh, that's like putting down a shield. But I'll tell that to my beloved because we are deliberately opening ourselves to one another. When do I feel luckiest? I may not want to tell that either because that luckiest moment may have been something that led to whatever success I happen to share. And I want to make people, including my spouse, to think that I worked my way to that success and there was no luck in it. And so to actually share that with your spouse, well, actually, I was pretty lucky when this or that happened. Usually we tend to leave that out when we're talking to other people. To confess that, I was really lucky to get through this, you're telling something very deep. And as I said, there's 44 questions in here that are about the sharing the secrets game. And as I said, never go and do more than 3 in a night because we'll start trivializing them. And you don't have to do them like we did when we did 3 of them on Tuesday night, and now it's Wednesday night, we're going to do 3 more. No, do them when the time is right. How do I know when the time is right? Well, haven't you been watching, listening, and hearing? Well, now the time's right. If you've been watching, listening, and hearing, you'll know when the time is not right. And so let it go. Do it when the time is right. Then there's another one of dealing with secrets, but it's not called secrets. It's this one's a little bit different. Okay, these are about how you see yourself in the world now. And so one of them might be, what acts have the most meaning for you? What acts that you do have the most meaning for you? Notice there's no right or wrong answers to these. All we're looking for is what's in your soul, what's in your heart, what's in your mind. And the other person is there to listen, watch, learn. Another one is, when do you value your lover the most?
Wait, Dr. Wagner, this kind of questions that actually are pertaining to who you really are internal, wouldn't that involve a risk of being
Being what?
judged by the person?
No, I don't even know what that means.
Like being judged, right?
Oh, being jealous?
Judged.
Judged?
Hmm.
Well, you're not being judged by the other person. You're the one that's giving the answers to yourself, about yourself. And you're giving them because you trust the other person. Here's another question that's going to follow up on what you just asked. It'll make you feel even more uncomfortable. When do you feel most vulnerable to your lover?
Mm.
The very question, vulnerable, the very word vulnerable means I'm protecting this. I don't want to let this out. And the question even says, when are you protecting this most from the very person you're spending your life with? Oh man, I really have to dig deep, not to figure out what it is, because I know it's lurking back there. I don't want to find it. But if I go looking, I know I'm going to find it. but now I don't want to tell it. But if you tell it, you're putting a lot of trust in the other person, as they might in you. So in both of those appendices, both A and B, have ways of helping you fill that treasure box that you're each filling. That is a reminder and a celebration of who the two of you are together. Only your lover, only your spouse has that jewel box of your deepest secrets and of your deepest thoughts about yourself and the other. That's privacy. It's shared privacy. It's an incredible gift. And it is far more than two people standing far apart, one on one. It's people who have come together and said, I trust, I watch, I listen, I learn. I'm happy to be a new social entity with you and no one else. And I want to go forward with you. That's
Till
power.
that,
That's building a relationship.
till that do us apart. Wow, very intense. Um, so do today's men and women in your social economic population want to slay dragons for their beloved or be rescued from tragedy by their beloved?
Oh, sure we do. And of course, we all try to be so intellectual these days. I don't know why. We have more than enough intellectuals in our world as it is. But we all try to be intellectual, and we try to say, uh, "Oh, that business about slaying dragons from days of old, that probably wasn't even true then. It was just part of mythology and so on and so forth." Yeah, it was largely a part of mythology and so on. There's a reason why it was part of mythology, because we do want to slay dragons for our beloved. We do want our beloved to go out and slay dragons for us. On this one, I'll give you a personal experience. Um, no, I haven't slain any dragons for anyone, but I did take somebody who was, who I was very close with, to a doctor who was concerned about something. He examined her. He was a specialist. He examined her, and then the nurse came out to get me to come and get her. I get to the doorway, and there she is, along with the doctor and another nurse. Her eyes were filled with tears, and there's a test he wants her to get because he thinks she has a certain type of cancer. And that's powerful stuff. Um, and what do you do with that? Well, that was my chance to slay a dragon. So I'm taking her out of the building. She doesn't know what to say. I don't know what to say. What do you say to a person who is anticipating having if not a fatal disease, a very painful disease that may require months, maybe years of painful treatment? There's a lot to cry about. So how do I slay this dragon? I had to think of something, and I had no words. It may seem to you I have a lot of words, but not to that person, not at that moment. I had to slay a dragon. And so what I did was there was a church nearby the medical center. And as we were driving by, I decided to pull into it. It was a church that neither of us went to, but it was a church. I parked the car, and I asked her to get out and to come with me. And we went into the empty building, and I said, we went up toward the front, and I said, "You sit here, and I'm not going to leave, but I'm going to be a couple of rows back for a while, and then I'll come up and sit with you. And I want you to stop trying to figure anything out. Just listen. And she said, for what? And I said, I don't know. But just listen and wait. And I'll be right behind you. And I'll come up in about 20 minutes and we'll sit together. In the meanwhile, I'll be doing the same. I'll be back there and I'll be quiet. No cell phone, nothing to read. But I too will be listening for what I need to be doing now. That's what we did. And after about 20 minutes, I went up and I sat next to her, and she put her head on my shoulder, and we sat there for maybe another 10 or 15 minutes in silence. And then we got up and left, still in silence. We're in the car, and I'm driving her home. About halfway there, I asked her, I said, are you a little bit better now? She said, yeah, thank you. She said, how did you know that was the right thing to do? I said, I didn't know. I just had a hunch, and I knew I had to do something. See, well, you sure did the right thing. The bottom line on that, she didn't have the cancer, but she didn't know that until like 3 days later. But she still remembered how important it was of what I did. And I am delighted with what I did. I didn't figure it out. I happened to do the right thing, but it also gave me the feeling of I slayed a dragon for her. Gave her a feeling too that this man that was in her life at the time had slayed a dragon for her. So that metaphor is something that I think we all want. We want someone that will go out and fight the enemy for us, fight this dragon and slay a dragon for us. We also want somebody who, and when the circumstances are changed around, will charge ahead and slay a dragon. I have sometimes asked my students, and they pick up these popular one-liners from, I don't know, TV or grade school. I don't know where they get these things from. But one of the things that, they all would have a tendency to say would be something like, well, you should never get in a fight. There's no reason to ever get in a fight. And I'll hear that from them. And in a class one time, there was mostly women in the class. I asked them, what if you're out with a boyfriend, you're walking down the street, and a couple of mean, tough guys come up and they want to abuse you. And, you and your boyfriend try to talk your way out of that, but they're not having anything of that. And should your boyfriend then just go, well, I don't know what else to do because I can't fight you? Or do you think he should step between them and you? The very girls who are all insisting that people should never get in a fight, you can always work things out. Everyone agrees, well, he should get in between those guys and me and do what he can to save my well-being, my purity, whatever it might be. So all of a sudden, not only is it okay to fight, but here's a noble moment in which you ought to fight. And if you do fight, you've slayed a dragon.
So it reminds me, have you ever heard of Mario Brothers video game?
Oh yeah, sure.
Right? So I think usually the old games are what is it called? Damsel in distress.
Oh, I'm not
The
going to remember the
princess
names of
is
the
oh
games. Yeah.
what? Yeah, no. Like the scenario, the princess is stuck somewhere in the tower and she's waiting for somebody to come, and the knight or whatever, and that becomes her prince because he went through all that trouble to get her. But if he was to do that for someone else, oh no, that's wrong. You shouldn't do it.
Not only do we want to slay a dragon for our beloved, but we should think about the other side. Each of us also wants our beloved to value us enough that they want to slay. A princess wants to be won,
Hmm.
and even a knight wants to be won. And so the slaying of the dragon isn't just a one-way thing. We also want to be won by another. An example that sometimes comes to mind, uh, somebody may say that there's this perfectly nice suitor, um, male or female, whatever, that really likes them. And the trouble is, it's like a puppy dog. There's nothing wrong with this person, but can you like that person? And most likely, no, not romantically, because the person's driving me crazy. I don't want a puppy. I want to be one. And the puppy who's already thrown everything aside and said, "Yeah, take me, I'm yours," isn't going to get anywhere. We want to be one. Whether you're a girl or a guy, you want to be one. And whether you're a girl or a guy, you want that occasion where you're going to get to slay a dragon for the other. Those are important ways of moving your relationship forward. Those are important ways to move toward an altar or a justice of the peace for marriage. And even along the way in your marriage, those events come up. It's refreshing. It's refreshing to slay a dragon for your spouse at any time in life. I've got one other example of that. Now I'll mention it. When I was 6 or 7 years old, there was a gas war going on, and my parents wanted to get cheap gas in their car. And this was so long ago. We're lucky we had cars instead of horses. But I'm in the back seat of the car. It was a Sunday morning. We go down to a gas station in the city, and there was a big guy, and he's beating the living heck out of this woman over on the side of the street there. And my mother yells at my father to stop the car. And so he did. She swings open the door, and they're middle aged at this time. She swings open a door and she gets out and she's running across the street, telling this big guy to stop beating that woman. And my father goes, "Oh, Mary, oh my God." And he says to me, "Whatever you do and whatever happens, do not unlock the doors to this car." And he turns off the car, he closes the car, and he's got to go over there. Man's got to do what a man's got to do, is the way he looked at it. And if that guy who was beating that other woman turned on his wife, he was going to have to stand up to the guy. My dad was 6'2", but this other guy was about that size too, and probably had 60, 70 pounds on my dad. And but my dad was good at talking. And somehow my mother wasn't so good at talking. So I'm not sure she was helping much. But when my dad got over there, I don't know how he did it. I don't know what he said, but he calmed everything down. And I know from the moment that happened, and my mother hops out of the car and he goes, "Oh, Mary, for God's sakes." Um, he knew what could be ahead. He could have gotten beaten too. She could have gotten beaten. He could have gotten beaten. I could have gotten beaten. They could have come into the car and who knows what. But he did what he had to do. And, so in that day, he both got to win his princess because he was going to stand between her and the threat of that other man. And he also got to slay the dragon. And in this case, fortunately, he didn't have to lay hands on the dragon. And the dragon was subdued with speech. And in fourth grade, when they tell you don't ever have to fight, you can always talk your way out. No, you can't always talk your way out of it. But my dad did talk his way out of that one. He was talented, but he was prepared to do whatever he had to do for the sake of his wife. That's real life. That's real love. That's commitment. And we tend to sloven ourselves all over the reality of being a social unit together, of why we have the myths that we do about slaying dragons or winning the love of the princess. Well, it's because for thousands of years, those have been motivating to us, because those tell you something about who we are as a species.
Wow. Wow. So, Dr. Wagner, you say that physically drifting apart can be overcome with proper counseling. But when you say drifting apart on an intellectual levels is more difficult to repair and emotional infidelity is most typically unrepairable. So what does that mean?
That's really a tough question. Yeah, I'm glad you started with the easy part first. Sometimes somebody gets distracted by a possible suitor, and maybe they have an affair. Studies tell us that men tend to have affairs for physical reasons alone. They just got out, drank too much, perhaps, just got wild and crazy, whatever. And they're sorry that they did it. And the wife may be very upset about the whole thing. But if they go to a therapist and the therapist gets them both to, one, calm down, take a breath, and did you really mean? You might say to a fellow, did you really mean to put this relationship on the line just for a one night stand or whatever? And of course, the fellow's going to say no, and he's going to be sorry. And if it was a woman, that's a little bit more difficult because women are less likely to have the one night stand. They tend to, when they have an affair, it tends to be not physical, but it begins emotional and intellectual first. So they tend to be more dangerous. Um, but in any case, a therapist is a good place to repair the crack. There was some reason the guy went out and had the one night stand. Might have been because he was feeling insecure either about their relationship, maybe about how well his career was going. Who knows? But they tend to be the kind of things that therapists are really good, or your pastors at your church, or whatever it might be, your rebbes, and so, where somebody stands in the middle there and says, well, let's get an idea. Let's imagine what was going on. So we're watching. Let's listen to what he's saying or she's saying, and uh, what was that? Watch, listen, and learn. Oh, and learn why he might have done that. Learn why you did that, and then those are repairable. And those are the things which therapists are really best at. When it gets to an intellectual intimacy, it's a little bit more difficult. If you have a person who is a junior attorney at a law firm, and they have been working through difficult cases with a more senior attorney, um, they're talking about really difficult stuff and trying to maneuver the right strategy to navigate through a court case together. And when they go home, they don't have that kind of thing to navigate. With the fact that they may go home and you can't even talk to your spouse about the intricacies of the courtroom. It's just too difficult. People that have never been to law school, that have never engaged in that sort of thing, really can't put it together. Same with people that are in I met an engineer one time. Oh, well, he was a good runner, and so was his wife. I got to know both of them. She was great. He was great, but he kept on leaving routinely, accepting jobs from his company to go off to far off places in the world to look for oil. And that was fine when they were younger, but as they got older and they had a kid and so on, he she wanted to spend more time with her husband. They had more money than they could use, and so it wasn't a matter of him trying to financially take care of his family. He liked the adventure of it, and he had great stories to tell. He was one of the first people in Vietnam after the Vietnam War was over with, and he's an American, but he was over there to look for oil, and because the geological evidence they had was that there might be some oil in some certain place. So he liked to go and look and test soils and do whatever else, someone like that does. And she knew that at his post at the company and at this place in life, he didn't have to do that and be gone for a couple of months at a time, be back home for 3 weeks, and then he's gone again. And so that became a real problem where she's really saying, reasonably so, who are you in love with, me or the company? There wasn't another person involved, but it was kind of like that one and one next to each other. Well, there was no two. They really were one and one next to each other. She wanted to be a couple. He wanted to have someone to come home to, but most of the time he wanted to be off on an adventure. So uh, that intellectual intimacy of figuring out where the oil might be was so attractive to him. Going into parts of the world he never imagined going to was so attractive to him intellectually that he was, I don't know if he was making a self-conscious choice, but he was neglecting his wife and his family, and it was hurting them, and he just didn't know it. And so that's a little bit more difficult. I'm not sure therapists can understand that as well. It might take another, in this case, somebody who knows a lot about the thrill of geology and oil seeking, or in the first case about the law, may require somebody who knows something about that intellectual territory that they can appreciate why the other one is getting distracted and help get the other one back. Now, a therapist hasn't been trained in that. They've been trained in therapy. It works well for, physical distraction. But for intellectual distraction, it may not be what you want it to be. And then finally, the emotional thing. That is so difficult for anyone but the two people to understand. Um, no one's ever seen your love for your spouse. You've only seen traces of it, but you felt it. How did you feel it? What does it feel like? Does it feel like cold, warm, hard, soft? No, it doesn't feel like any of those things. So what does it feel like? You can't tell anybody else what it feels like. Heck, Sir Peter Strawson, a philosopher, it even worried a long time ago. What are we saying to somebody else when we say, I have a pain in my tooth? How does anybody else understand it? You point to the tooth. It's your first bicuspid on the left side. And what does it mean if the other person were to say, oh, yeah, I've had a pain in that tooth too? They don't know that they've had the exact pain there. They can say that they've felt discomfort in that tooth, but they don't know that they felt the same discomfort. When you go to a dentist or you go to the hospital and they're going to give you some anesthetic to mitigate the pain as they treat it, they may ask you, well, how much pain are you in right now on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst and 1 being the least. They know that, like, if you say 8, it's not the same 8 that everybody else would say 8. It's your 8, and it's high on your imaginary scale. And so they're going to try to give you whatever anesthesia will help bring that down, and whatever soothing words might help bring that down as they proceed. But they can't see it. They can't measure it. They can't watch it go down. It's an imaginary trick, if you will, that helps us navigate our way through something that we can't more precisely designate. So when there's this emotional disturbance between a family, and it's a really emotional disturbance, I don't feel for that other person like I used to. Well, try harder. Now, that's not going to work. Try harder. I'm trying as hard as I can. That's not what it takes. Here, have a glass of wine, then you'll love your spouse more. No, that's not going to work. Have your spouse do some kind of fancy dance or whatever. It's not going to work either. But what is going to work? I don't know. And just like all of us normal people, the therapist also is befuddled by a break in the emotional intimacy between two people. And the way
Wow.
you build it back, there's no path that you just walk through. The story I bring up, that brought up a couple times before about the chaplain.
Hmm.
You do some things that let the other person, if they're still watching, see what you're doing. That you do some things that if the other person is still listening, that they'll hear. You do some things that if the other person still wants to learn, they'll learn that you're still in the game. they just don't feel it anymore because the distraction of another person outside. I'm not sure there's any way around that. At least I've never heard of such a thing that can be mechanically worked out. And I can't give advice about that sort of thing either. Best I can do is say, don't let yourself get that far involved with anybody else emotionally. If you feel any kind of emotional twinges and you are married, move away from whatever is the source of the emotional twinges. That's it.
I'm still just getting all this in my brain sponge. Wow. Um, Towards the end of the book, you say that you can give us some simple ideas about how to sustain a loving relationship. What are some of those ideas?
Well, some of them we've already talked about in the past. Always look for little things that you can do for your spouse from out of nowhere. It doesn't have to be a fancy gift, but every now and then just do something nice for your spouse. Simple things. Um, it can be as simple as you see somebody, one of the kids has left their socks on the floor. Either you get the kids to come out and pick up their socks or you pick it up, but you don't leave it for your spouse to pick up. That's not a biggie. But that is saying I'm still in the game here. It's us. It's not 2-1 standing next to each other. This is our house. This is us. Those are socks that if I don't pick them up, she's going to have to pick them up. Why would I want her to have to pick them up when I'm right here and I can do it now? You go to the grocery store and you're doing your shopping list or whatever, and you go, oh, he likes chocolate chip cookies. I think I've got a couple of chocolate chip cookies while I'm there. What? That's 79 cents? But it was showing that you were thinking about him. Watch, listen, learn. So you're at that grocery store and you remembered how he loved to eat those chocolate chip cookies. You listened to him talk about chocolate chip cookies. You learned he really liked them. So you pick up a couple of chocolate chip cookies to bring home. Little things like that. Putting your hand on somebody when you don't need to. Maybe you're in the car and you're driving someplace. You just reach over and you put your hand on the other person, just for a moment, and that's just the way of saying, "I like you being here. I like you being here with me. I like us. I like us. I like the singularly unique corporate entity that we have created called us."
So, Dr. Wagner, do you think it's possible for a person to develop similar feelings to someone else?
Oh, sure.
Not romantic. Again, I'm just trying to I'm trying to understand why people knowingly would have an affair because they're not getting one thing from their partner that they find in their friend or best friend or neighbor or coworker.
Yeah. Usually it's because of something is threatening them. They're not feeling secure about who they are. Um, they um, they look in a mirror. They don't see the same person they saw in the mirror 10 or 15 years ago. Um, their clothes are different sizes, perhaps. Uh, Little things that have them unsettled, and they desperately want um, an attaboy. Do you know what I mean by that phrase, an
Hmm.
attaboy?
Hmm.
It's when, like your boss says, attaboy, you're doing great work. The business research has shown that workers are much more likely to stay with a company when you've got a boss who gives out genuine attaboys, and that means more than even a raise in salary. And so even within a relationship, a person starts feeling insecure about themselves. It may have nothing to do with the other person. It may just be, they're feeling insecure because of what they see in the mirror, or they've been at the same job level for so long, and they need the occasional attaboy. And uh, watch, listen, and learn. You see that weakness is showing up in the other person. Look for some way to They help buckle them up. Say, you're still that guy, or you're still that beauty.
Wow. It's really amazing how there is no manual on how to run a family, how to be a parent, how to be a uh, good best friend, how to be a brother, how to be a husband or wife. But we're all doing it for so many years, and there's so many couples that happily stay together um, for a long, long time. And there are
Part of the
some.
reason I think for that is we try to go about it too mechanically. It's like in the schools where we measure student success by what they do on a multiple choice test. That doesn't tell us that they can grow up and be a successful surgeon or an attorney. It just tells us they can remember some stuff on a multiple choice test. Um, and the sort of things that I've mentioned here have really been guidelines, or what's popularly called guardrails now, to keep you from falling off the road that you want to traverse. But uh, to try to mechanize it and say you just walk through this step by step, that's never going to catch up to what you need. You can't just um, do this, and this, and make a marriage work. You can't just use this goofy line to make somebody you meet in a bar be charmed and like you. The world of human engagement isn't like that. You've got to have a feel for what you're doing. So again, I'm back to my three words: listen, watch, listen, and learn. That's what's going to take you where you want to go. It may not take you where you want to go as well as it does somebody else, because maybe they can listen, watch, and learn better than you can. Maybe one of those three or all three, who knows? But whatever, every one of us gets better to the extent that we try and succeed to listen, to watch, and then learn.
So going back to your first book, um, Love Trauma, we had a question there about some people say they have everything they need in a marriage, so they don't have to officially or formally get married. But I guess this is when that formal marriage comes into play, because yes, you have everything a married couple has, um, but when you make those vows, when you are making that commitment in front of like people or that divine entity, whoever you follow, it gives you an assurance, it gives you a reminder to your soul that, hey, this is now, this is the commitment I'm making, and I have a witness. I have to make sure that I do this, regardless of you already doing it for 10, 15 years. Like the couple can be together, but they were never officially married.
Mm-hmm.
But this is, I guess, the reason they should get married or formalize it. That real union begins after that real commitment, because until that happens, you still have back of your mind that, oh, okay, we're not
When the young
married.
person, when the young person says, "Well, I don't need that sheet of paper.
Mhm.
We just love each other," and um, that's double talk for saying, "I'm
Yeah,
afraid
but
to take any more bold steps forward with you. I don't want to take the chance that something may go wrong and we have to wind up in court, and there'll have to be lawyer expenses, and we'll lose money one way or the other. And I don't want to take that chance." And that's what they're saying. And no matter how much the two say we don't need that piece of paper, what they're really saying is, I am too fearful. I'm not bold enough to step forward with you. So with or without any version of God in the question, this just keeps it down at the secular and civil level of
Mhm.
saying, I don't want to step forward boldly in that fashion. Too much risk. And the real fact of the matter, as near as I can tell, any religious person of any religion I've ever come across, if they decided they wanted to get divorced, they got divorced regardless of what their religion was. It wasn't their religion that kept them from getting divorced. Um, Splitting up property may keep them from getting divorced. Uh, a really powerful lawyer on the other side may keep them from getting divorced. But their religion, I've never saw a couple where one of the partners really wanted to get a divorce and they didn't because of their religion. That's a sad thing to say,
Yeah,
but I've never seen that.
yeah. It's usually the wealth or the kids. Mostly people stay together because of the kids. But very, very interesting, Dr. Wagner. I don't know. I'm still observing and trying to dissect all of this in my mind. But once again, thank you so much. We truly appreciate you taking the time and explaining these topics from your book and the research you've done. This concludes the part three. So we are done with Beyond Love Trauma. We will see the viewers in another book with another topic very soon. But Dr. Wagner, once again, thank you so much for the wisdom, for the knowledge, and the time that you give us.
Thank you, Dr. DePaul.
All right, sir. Bye bye.